The accountant's code. In every large corporation, numbers tell a story. Sometimes they whisper, other times they scream. In 2019, Falcon Ridge Infrastructure Group, a multinational engineering conglomerate, won a series of billion-dollar government contracts to rebuild public highways across the United States. The projects promised jobs, progress, and renewed public trust after years of decaying roads and corruption scandals. But beneath the sleek press releases and ribbon-cutting ceremonies, a quieter narrative was unfolding, one written not in asphalt, but in accounting ledgers. Linda Hart, a 46-year-old senior accountant, had worked for Falcon Ridge for nearly 2 decades. Diligent, precise, and respected, she lived by what she called the accountant's code. Never manipulate what you can prove. For years, she had reconciled figures that balanced perfectly, until one spring afternoon, she noticed something she couldn't explain. The expense reports for the Ohio Highway Redevelopment Project didn't align with the invoices from their contractors. A $6.4 million payment to a vendor named Atlas Earthworks, LLC, was recorded as soil stabilization materials, yet the vendor's tax ID didn't match any licensed supplier in the state. Linda did what good accountants do. She double-checked, then triple-checked. Atlas Earthworks didn't exist. When she brought the anomaly to her supervisor, Finance Director Mason Cole, he waved it off. Probably a clerical code mismatch. Linda will reconcile it next quarter. But something in his tone, dismissive yet anxious, made her uneasy. A week later, Linda received an anonymous email from the company's internal messaging system. It contained only a single line. Check Project Delta 13. You're not supposed to see this. And attached, a PDF of internal ledger exports showing multiple payments to fandom vendors linked to offshore entities in the Cayman Islands and Belize. That night, Linda printed the documents and stored them in a locked drawer at home. The next morning, she contacted the Office of the Inspector General, OIG, under whistleblower protection protocols. Within days, 2 forensic accountants, Ryan Keller and Marissa Boyd, were assigned to quietly investigate Falcon Ridge's ledgers under the radar. Their review revealed a pattern that spanned 5 years. Dozens of vendor companies were receiving large transfers disguised as operational expenses. Each vendor shared a similar digital footprint, identical invoice templates, overlapping IP metadata, and recurring digital signatures traced to one encrypted domain, falconridge-admin.net. That domain wasn't public. It was an internal shadow network, accessible only from the company's senior executive accounts. Ryan's team reverse-engineered the system, discovering that Mason Cole, Linda's supervisor, had administrative privileges that allowed him to bypass procurement approval layers. Every fraudulent payment had been routed through his access, but Mason wasn't alone. The forensic audit uncovered that these funds were later funneled through a private equity firm in Zurich, then redirected into luxury real estate holdings in New York, Dubai, and Monaco. The beneficiaries? A cluster of shell corporations tied to Falcon Ridge's Vice President of Global Operations, Richard Hale. It was internal theft at a monumental scale, an estimated $410 million siphoned over 6 years. When the forensic team presented their initial findings to the Department of Justice, a covert joint task force was created, Operation Concrete Veil. In August 2020, undercover investigators began monitoring Hale's movements. They uncovered lavish private jet flights, offshore meetings, and coded communications with foreign officials connected to infrastructure kickbacks. Meanwhile, Linda continued working inside Falcon Ridge, collecting data while pretending nothing had changed. She saved transaction logs onto encrypted USB drives and passed them discreetly to Keller's team during staged training workshops. But secrets have a way of surfacing. Late one evening, she returned to her desk to find her computer screen frozen. displaying the message: unauthorized access attempt detected. Please contact IT. The next morning, she was summoned to a meeting with HR and security. We've noticed irregular login activity on your workstation. The HR director said softly, "You've been accessing restricted files." Linda's pulse pounded. "I'm doing my job. I reconcile what I'm told to reconcile." The meeting ended inconclusively, but she knew her cover was blown. That night, she fled her apartment, fearing retaliation. The Whistleblower Protection Hotline placed her under temporary federal custody. Within 48 hours, the DOJ executed simultaneous raids at Falcon Ridge offices in Chicago, Houston, and New York. Servers were seized. Executives detained. Mason Cole was arrested at his home in Connecticut, but Richard Hale was gone. By the time agents reached his penthouse, he had fled to Switzerland, where Falcon Ridge's private equity conduit was based. The evidence from a forensic audit was staggering. Every transaction, every hidden ledger, every falsified invoice bore Hale's encrypted authorization keys. He had designed the fraud system himself during his tenure as IT integration head years before becoming vice president. In court filings, prosecutors described it as a digital labyrinth of deception, where every ledger line concealed another. The forensic team presented dynamic reconstruction visuals, holographic projections showing how funds moved in real time from U.S. accounts to offshore trusts, masked by shell company transactions. In an unprecedented move, the Swiss Federal Police collaborated with U.S. authorities to freeze Hale's assets. The turning point came when one of Hale's former assistants, Sophie Landers, agreed to cooperate. He said the numbers were his empire, she told investigators. He believed money was just data, and data could always be rewritten. By mid-2021, Hale was extradited to the United States. His trial became one of the most watched corporate crime cases of the decade. During the proceedings, Linda testified, her voice steady, her eyes unwavering. She recounted how she discovered the first anomaly, the resistance she faced, and the silent fear of knowing her integrity made her a target. "I didn't set out to be a hero," she said on the stand. "I just couldn't look away when the math didn't add up." Hale's defense argued that she was an overzealous accountant who misinterpreted project complexities, but the digital evidence dismantled every claim. When a forensic report was projected before the jury, it showed over 27,000 falsified transactions, each with unique digital fingerprints linking to Hale's encryption key. After 8 weeks of testimony, the verdict was clear: guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Hale received a 35-year federal sentence. Mason Cole, who cooperated partially, received 12 years. Falcon Ridge paid over $800 million in restitution and penalties, effectively dismantling its North American operations. But justice, as Linda would later reflect, came at a cost. Her career in corporate accounting was over. She lived quietly under a different name in Oregon, consulting anonymously for non-profit forensic projects. Ryan Keller's forensic division became a model for corporate transparency units, using AI-driven ledgers that automatically cross-check financial trails with vendor authentication databases. In a 2024 interview for a forensic documentary, Linda said, "Numbers are the only witnesses that never lie. People do, for money, for power, for survival. But in the end, the numbers bring them back to truth." Her courage and the subsequent reforms became known in corporate circles as the accountant's code, an unwritten creed of forensic integrity that redefined corporate compliance culture. Years later, the Falcon Ridge scandal would serve as a case study in universities, training new forensic accountants not just in data tracing, but in moral courage. Because at its heart, this story wasn't about numbers. It was about the human choice between complicity and conscience, moral and call to action. Integrity has no price tag. Every professional, whether accountant, auditor, or executive, faces moments where the truth demands courage. The accountant's code reminds us that silence protects the corrupt, but transparency protects the future. Always follow the numbers, no matter where they lead. For justice begins with one person who refuses to falsify the truth.